to our very first Saxon Insurance Brokers podcast. And today we're going to tell you about what we get up to and a more important topic, Kidnap and Ransom Insurance, which I describe as the only insurance we do that protects people over assets. Here I am with my colleague Charlie Firth. Charlie, welcome to the podcast.
Good to start the series.
You are our resident detective, as described on our website, which I think is great. My grandfather was a policeman and a sergeant of a police force locally, so I'm also a bit of a detective as well. I like that sort of stuff. So first off, let's talk about what we've been up to, because we're right in the middle of a lockdown. Well, we're coming to the end of our second UK lockdown, and we've been working the whole time because we've managed to social distance. We've created a bit of a bubble with the team here. So let's talk about, or tell our audience about, what Saxon has been up to since March, really, since the beginning of this crazy lockdown.
Yeah, well, as you said, obviously, being in the office has been really beneficial. You know, it's way more helpful being able to just chat and have that interaction you have as you would do on a normal day-to-day basis before this whole lockdown. So, yeah, we've definitely been fortunate to be able to carry on continuing working in the office throughout this whole period of time.
Yeah, actually, we weren't in the office at the very beginning of lockdown because no one could be. But then as things eased up, we could. So I think middle of summer we were sort of back in the office, and most of our partners, insurers, and other brokers, I don't think are anywhere close to being in the office. And
we've been fortunate.
Yeah, a lot of places have shrunk their setup so to accommodate for working from home or working remotely or a rotation basis. So we're right in the middle of a changing world at the moment, which is fascinating. And that sort of leads us on to what else is happening in the world, because naturally, as most people will know, that we insure very high value assets, so property, art, yachts, jewellery collections, and everything in between, really. But there's this one insurance that we do that protects people, and it's topical right now, isn't it? Because what's happening at the moment is the pandemic is changing the criminal world around us, and especially in places like Latin America. So we are very in tune with what goes on. We're reading articles and news. We're watching and reading everything all the time to know what's happening in the security world, if you like. And tell the audience what you found that's been happening in the last few months since this pandemic, because there's been some changes in the OCGs.
So obviously the various pressures that the pandemic itself has put on, you know, economies all around the world, and from a social aspect as well. You know, everyone's working from home, no one's in the office, jobs are under pressure, people are struggling for money as such, and this has affected criminal groups because, you know, from the sort of narcotic side of things, the shipments that come over from all around the world to places like Latin America were all strained. There was so much pressure put on them because they couldn't get the shipments across because all the shipping, the ports were shut, that sort of thing.
What was in those shipments?
I mean, I think what I think it to be is the shipments come across from places around the world with the substances that they use. So and then they get a variety of substances, mix them all together, and then they make a drug from that. And then from there, in Latin America, they get shipped across, either back around the world or up to America. But the problem with this is that criminals or criminal organisations have been forced to sort of diversify and find new ways of getting their money, because they all still need the money. You know, they're so heavily income based that, you know, things like express kidnapping across Latin America, not just in places like Mexico, across the whole of Latin America, and through to Africa, places like that, has really had a massive impact. And now it's spreading into the maritime industry. You know, we've both seen reports of the piracy attacks that are occurring in the last, over the last month or so, have really just shot up way more than what they were predicted to be this year.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because if the cartels of the world have not been able to do their standard business, you know, they can't hide as easily with their planes flying because there's much less traffic in the air, or a boat stands out, you know, one of their fast boats stands out because there's virtually no maritime or marine activity, then they're changing the ways, aren't they? Like you just said. So, what is it that we've seen these guys take on and start to do more of that they are hoping is going to generate income for them?
It's just kidnappings.
Yeah.
Basically, at the end of the day, you know, kidnappings are seen by criminals as one of the easiest ways to get money quickly. You know, there's always reports of the long drawn out kidnaps where huge ransoms are demanded. They take months and months, but the majority of the time it's express kidnappings, which is when you're approached maybe on the street by a criminal gang, and they take you into the car, and they may hold you at gunpoint, something along those lines, and then they'll take you around numerous ATMs in the area, and you'll just be forced to withdraw the cash, and you've just got to carry on doing that until they are satisfied with the amount of money they've given you.
So, I mean, if I'm a cartel leader, I'm not that interested in that sort of thing, am I? Because how much can I realistically get from a individual who's being driven around 10 ATMs, you know, $200-300 a time? It's not going to be life-changing money that they usually earn doing their normal way. So, you know, there's express kidnap is definitely, I think, happening, and it's over very quickly. I think we've explained it in one of your articles that, you know, within an hour an express kidnap can be over. But rather than demanding money out of an ATM, it could even be that a ransom is demanded within an hour, or they take their life. And I think that's where they will perhaps have more success, especially if people have access to cash quickly, because we live in a very civilized world over here in England, but over in other places in Latin America, I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect there's a lot more cash moving around in the underground and above, that can satisfy quick demands if they need to. So an express kidnap could be like $500,000 in cash within an hour, or I'm afraid, you know, this guy's life is no longer.
And the problem is, you know, these gangs, these cartels, they know how much money they need to be making every quarter, for example. It just runs like a normal business because they're so massive, these organisations, and they're involved in so much different stuff. So they know how much money they need to be making, so they know their sort of targets as such they need to hit, and they're ruthless at the end of the day. You know, one express kidnapping may give them $1,000 or $2,000 at a time. So they know that they need to make a certain amount of express kidnappings at the moment, because that's sort of the only easiest way, or it's the easiest way they see to get money at the moment. So they're just like have let loose, basically.
I think the last two kidnaps that we've heard of in literally 2 days, one was the property developer in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, and the other one was a journalist. And I think, you know, I can understand the property developer because he might own land that someone else might want to have or control, and, you know, unfortunately that guy ended up being found dead further afield. But then it makes me think, well, what about the journalist? What's he got to give? You know, is it just because he's got data on someone? So is it just because he's got knowledge on someone else? So what we're seeing here is it's not all financially driven.
No.
So if someone like a journalist has insider knowledge on a certain group or person, then he's equally a target, and that's quite scary, because it basically means that you can be anyone in that spectrum, from someone straightforward like a journalist up to someone who could be a multi-millionaire or billionaire owning a lot of land. And if someone wants that, either land, money, data, you know, then you're your potential target. And that's scary, you know, because that means that whoever you are, you need some kind of protection.
I mean, at the end of the day, the cartels in these areas, they don't want bad press to start with, and they don't want people coming in their way. So those two things combined cover quite a lot of people. And bad press doesn't have to be from a journalist; it can come from anyone. You don't have to be a reporter. It's just, you know, word of mouth, things that spread around the streets and cities, villages, stuff like that. The cartels want to control as much as they can.
Yeah.
And they already control massive amounts, so it's sort of a snowball effect. As they control more and more places, they get more and more power, and with that power, they can then control more and more places.
Yeah.
And it just continues, and it's just a constant cycle.
Have we heard of any cartel versus cartel kidnaps or?
I don't know about the kidnaps, but there is a lot of violence over sort of areas the cartels control. Because, you know, the coastal areas, that's where the drug imports and things like that can come in. So if you control that, then you control the drugs in that area. So there's a lot of fighting over those sort of areas to just have control of them, to then be able to distribute as accordingly, basically.
So we're connected up with quite a few security related people on LinkedIn. We all tend to sort of share the same type of post, and some are a bit more active than others. We're kept up to date by other people, which is fantastic. But ultimately, what is the solution? So we've got two types of kidnap policies. It's for a high net worth individual and their families, which we do quite a lot of, because naturally we already have high net worth customers for the other assets that we insure for them. So it's quite easy for us to talk to them about the risks of kidnap and ransom, which a lot of the time they don't know exist. And they then think, wow, I need this cover. And before you know it, you know, we've got a high net worth family being protected by one of the very best world leading insurance companies, but not only that, backed up by these liaison firms that are global and have a presence in all the major areas that basically kick in as soon as they're needed to help you in a scenario. So I think private individuals value that a lot because they're on their own and they don't have any other support elsewhere unless they've got this. And then the other thing we've got is the corporation or the corporate kidnap and ransom, and we're seeing a lot of interest there, aren't we? Because even though travelling has been suppressed a lot during the pandemic, there seems to be some more activity picking up now. People know that the planes are flying and they can get around. And when you're building a support area or a mine or a wind farm or wherever it might be, strangely, they all seem to be in what we call high-risk areas. So what are the things that, first off, let's talk about corporates. What are the things that corporate organisations need to do when they're travelling from their normal base, which could be anywhere in the world, to a high-risk area? And like what are the systems in place, and what are our insurance companies expecting of them, so that anyone watching this video who is considering corporate kidnap and ransom, they know how to get set up prior to taking out a policy? So
the first, to start with, the obvious one is planning ahead, which I'm sure anyone who even goes on holiday, you know, you plan ahead, you know where you're going to go, you know where you're going to stay, you might have a look at places you might visit beforehand, so you get a grip of sort of the area that you're going to, especially if it's a renowned to be a dangerous place. So planning ahead, having a contingency plan in place, so you know where you're travelling, you know where you can travel if your original plan doesn't go as you'd like it to go. You've got diversion routes planned out already, so if a traffic jam or there's an accident or something, you can't get through the way you want to go, you don't have to replan there and then, you just have another route you can go. That sort of stuff, so that's the planning ahead side of things. You know, you do some research into places you're going to be spending time, maybe have a look at the local news, so you can get a bit more of a feel of what sort of situation the area is in, because a lot of these high risk areas, you know, they're either heavily run or have heavily involvement with, you know, criminal organisations, or there's a civil war going on there. You know, it's very futile and it can overnight change.
What about local knowledge? So if I'm a corporation going somewhere and I'm, you know, thinking about what plans I need to make, are we seeing security firms travelling with the team going, but also them working with more local people on the ground who know more than them?
So that's how it normally works. So you have it, if you're travelling to one of these high risk areas for sort of a big business project, you will most likely have a security detail with you.
Yeah.
And these security people, you know, majority of them have all got military experience or some sort of experience along those lines. But the added benefit is that the people you'll be assigned should have experience of the local area they're travelling to. So they've either spent time working there before, or they've spent time being a security personnel in the area beforehand, so they understand the area. And then there's things, so your driver might have lived in the area for 40 years or something along those lines, so they know exactly the routes, they know where to go, where not to go, where to go if something happens, and you know they'll understand all the diversion routes. So you can present with your contingency plan, contingency plan of where to go if something went wrong, and they understand it straight away. And
or have better ideas.
Exactly. So
they would have actually experienced it before. If you're going somewhere new, the local person would have probably said, you know, I've been here, done that, and yes, we need to go from here to here to here if this happens.
So local knowledge is incredibly important. You know, if you've got all the experience of a security in working in security detail, but you don't know anything about the place you're going to, you will get by. You know, they'll pick it up along the way. But having someone who's been there, who's worked there before, who understands how everything works, you know, how to go about walking down the street, things like that. That's the key part, and that's what's really important if you're going to these high risk areas.
And then on from that, we're seeing people stay in secure areas, aren't we? So in a high risk area, as in perhaps a whole town or country, you've got areas where people can go to who are foreign, basically, who can stay in these, and you know, we can imagine what they look like. You know, high walls, razor wire, alarms, armed guards, things like that. So, are we finding that that's quite a common theme of where people have to go,
definitely.
as in would they want to go there, and also our underwriters are expecting them to go there?
You know, there's two sides of it. You know, there's protecting yourself, and then there's the insurers wanting you to protect yourself. And you've got to be on both sides of that. You know, you've got to obviously want to protect yourself, and with that, you know, you'll go to the extent that you need to protect yourself, and the insurers will support that fully, because if you're travelling to these high risk areas and you already have a plan in place and you already know where you're going to stay, you've got a security detail with you, the insurers will support that. They're not going to ask you to go. They're going to want to know that you've got these things in place, because that gives them peace of mind, I guess, at the end of the day.
So there's quite a few other things that we haven't spoken about that we'll leave for another time, or perhaps if someone's interested, they can inquire with us about the things that underwriters expect you to do if you're travelling to a high risk area. Let's fast forward into something like a scenario where something's going wrong and contingency plan hasn't worked out, or even plan A hasn't worked out and they can't get to a contingency plan. What happens? So we've recently done some onboarding for a private customer, and that was really interesting, because we were in on the call and we were helping and guiding and listening. And what were the things that you learned from that the risk advisor told the customer directly, things like not to mention that you've got insurance in place, not to mention who, here's a number to call, but who it is, and so on. Can you explain a bit more about that?
This scenario is just planning ahead. You've got to prepare for the worst as such. So before you go away, you want to notify someone of, not necessarily you have to say you've got kidnap insurance, but maybe give them a number to ring or something along those lines, so that if the worst was to happen, they know what to do. And you need to be able to be securing yourself that if you get kidnapped, because in a kidnap scenario, you're going to be very stressed. So you don't want to be worrying about what's going to happen now. You want to think to yourself, well, I sorted this out however long ago, and I know what to do, I know who to ring, that's going to kick in, then my policy is going to kick in, and then that's where you receive the help.
So who is it that is on the end of the phone? If I am a person and the perpetrator's got me and I've been kidnapped and my phone is there and they want something, I'm giving them a number, but who is that for?
That would normally be for a family member or something along those lines, and the family member will receive the call, and they'll be the person that you've notified that you have this sort of insurance, and they won't mention anything about it on the phone, obviously, but they'll know the steps to take, and they'll then notify your either the insurer or they'll go straight through to the consultants or security consultants. And then that's when the most important part of the policy kicks in, because kidnap and ransom policy covers a variety of events and covers the ransom paid and that sort of stuff. But the really important thing is the response that you get from the consultants, because that protects your life at the end of the day. And you got to make sure that you have these things in place before you go to these areas.
One really interesting thing that we saw the other day that came through on an email was the process of a kidnapping from start to finish. And we understood it before that, but we saw it in a graphic, which made it made it a bit more real. And one thing that stands out on there is that whenever a demand is made, the consultant will always be asking for proof of life. Whether there's this negotiation bit happens with the family member and the consultant is helping that family member, and then there's proof of life requested. And I think that's key, because you could demand a ransom from someone and just never give proof of life, and they could be dead. And then you're negotiating with a family member, and that family member is never knowing if that person is still alive or not, and then they might pay a ransom for no reason.
So these negotiations are two ways. That's a negotiation at the end of the day. It's the criminal and the consultant, or the criminal and the family member with the support of a consultant. And the proof of life is the most important thing. You want, for the whole process, once the kidnap takes place to the victim being released, proof of life has got to be supported throughout. Because that then the criminals need to know that you're not just going to roll over and give them much money. You're working. You want to work with them, but you can't just meet every single demand, because sometimes that's not actually possible. So proof of life is a good way to sort of establish a process, and then once you have that proof of life, then you can move forward on to the next thing. And then once they ask for that demand, then you can ask for proof of life again. Because you also want to know that the victim is okay, still alive.
Of course.
So that's really important. Anyway, and for the family members involved, they want to have the reassurance that the person that's been kidnapped is still, getting along okay, and they're still coping well, and that sort of stuff.
It's really interesting. It would be terrifying to be in that situation, wouldn't it? And I think corporations have a duty of care to protect their staff members with this. And in addition to this, companies can also take out what we call crisis management insurance, which is mainly aimed at small, medium upwards, or medium-sized enterprise and upwards, and that covers a lot more like cyber attacks and things like that. So there are two types of policies that corporations tend to take. That is a crisis management, and dovetailed by a kidnap and ransom policy, because that's the one that will cover ransom payments and things like that.
So this type of insurance, both the crisis management and the kidnap and ransom insurance, and also kidnap and ransom doesn't cover just kidnap and ransom. It covers a variety of events such as threats, hostage, express kidnaps, detention, that sort of stuff. And then you also can have additional things that you can add onto policies, so emergency evacuation, that sort of stuff that helps you to get out of these areas. If you don't have to be kidnapped to have emergency evacuation. It's just a place that you're working could just go south overnight. And you've got to get out of there, and your life's at risk. And then you'll be covered for that sort of stuff.
I think that's actually a really good point, because kidnap and ransom as a title seems quite limited. Seems that you're only covered for a ransom when you've been kidnapped, and that's not the case. Like you just explained, it's one of the widest policies that you can ever buy, because it covers so much. Every security risk that you can think of is pretty much covered by kidnap and ransom insurance, especially for private individuals. And that crisis management complements that hugely.
And then the other side, the flip side is, that there's having kidnap and ransom insurance or having crisis management insurance. The point of that is giving you the peace of mind and the security that that you're going to be covered if the worst happened. But then on top of that, there's things that there's measures that you can take, just that aren't drastic. It's things like, as if you're in Latin America, where express kidnappings are really common, not wearing designer clothes constantly in local areas where the Western society, that sort of stuff, isn't as common as it would be in somewhere like America or in London. So you don't want to draw attention to yourself. You know, it's basic things, which is just common knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, not walking down dodgy street or streets that look dodgy or streets that don't have, you know, touristy things down them that are more local in the night and in the day. You know, it doesn't. The cartels don't distinguish between night and day, so you should be distinguishing between night and day.
I agree, and that was made me think about when you take out a kidnap and ransom policy, one of the most important things that you can do is tap straight into that consultant, because they are happy and they want to, from the outset, before anything happens, talk to you about your lifestyle, how you operate as a private person or a corporate business, and they will sit down and talk you through, or even meet you to go through what you need to know about your travels and the risks that you have. And one thing we haven't touched on is, which is made me think of it just then, is kidnap and ransom for yachts, because we've done an article on this recently, and it's key, isn't it, that these amazing floating palaces, we'll call them, that are owned by billionaires usually, which you know, luckily we insure some of them as well, that you can buy kidnap and ransom insurance via the protection and indemnity insurance. However, we would always recommend a much more comprehensive policy, a standalone. And I think the title to the last article was "This is the most overlooked insurance ever," because yacht owners and managers are sometimes a bit disconnected, and a yacht manager doesn't necessarily have the crew or the owners or the family of the owners' lives at you know, it's the foreground of his mind all the time. So they need to think about what extra protection they can get from a kidnap and ransom policy in case the daughter is taken, or the family member, or the captain is, and the vessel's completely what do you call it? You can't even use it anymore. Disabled is the word I was looking for. That was easy. So it's things like that we're also advising on a lot recently, and getting a lot of interest on. Because of that exposure that these high net worth individuals have. You
need to be aware that, you know, everyone needs to be aware that when you think of a kidnap, you think of someone who works in the government getting taken, or something like that, or diplomat.
Because we've watched films.
Exactly. Just from just culture, or someone who's an industry leader and they're just wanted for so much stuff, or someone who's done something bad and now they're wanted by criminals. It's not just that, you know, it goes much wider than that. It's not just contained on land anymore, you know. There's lots of kidnapping that take place out at sea now, because boats are susceptible to kidnaps, and they're easier, they're by themselves, there's no one else around them. You know, there's the armed security that you have on the boat, and that's it, there's no one else.
If that.
Exactly.
That's a commercial vessel, but not a private vessel. And like you said in the article about the low freeboards and easy access on the swim platform or a swim deck at the back, and that's you know, a big risk, because anyone with a rib can just roll straight up to a boat, a private yacht. They're never armed, as in the people on board, but the people coming to the boat could be. And you know, if you're in a remote area and no one's going to see anything, how would you know, raise the alarm bells anyway? So and going off that, I've seen. I actually saw an article this morning that was, you know, the majority of the articles that we see and updates and news posts that we see that we're in touch with people about is all sort of kidnappings that taking place in Latin America. I saw one this morning that was a kidnap that took place in Spain. I saw that as well.
And you know, that just goes to show, you know,
it's local.
Criminals are diversifying at the end of the day, and it's not just contained in places like Latin America, in Africa, those sort of areas that are more high risk. It's contained in Europe. It's now spreading across to Europe. Because people are desperate.
I would actually like to know how much of this stuff is actually kept out of the news, because it's important. But as soon as you make a kidnapping public, you know, what happens? You know, does the ransom go up? Do the perpetrators want more because it's public and they want to make everyone else scared of what they're up to or what they're capable of? And I suspect, especially high-profile political things, when those kidnaps happen or events happen with regards to those characters, they're kept out of the news, and they're silenced, and they're never released. So we probably only hear 20% of it.
And that's also, that's the job of the security consultants that you have.
Yeah,
Your policy.
yeah.
Totally. They're there. They've got the experience, more experience than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
In just this sort of negotiation side of things and liaising with families and kidnappers, that sort of, and criminal groups, and they're there to mitigate risk. At the end of the day, they're not going to do anything that's going to put you, being the family, or you as the victim, in harm's way. Yeah, they're there to get you out as safely as they can,
and they'll be the ones that are stopping the public eye getting hold of this. Yeah, because if you are, we saw it with a business not that long ago that was hit by ransomware, which is covered by crisis management. So ransomware controlled their business, and they couldn't do anything for days. Demanded a $10 million ransom to turn the systems back to how they were, so they could operate and not lose money on customers. And we never heard the outcome. We never heard anything. So we don't know if that ransom was satisfied. We don't know if it was negotiated down. We didn't know anything. And the reason is because if that business had been found and it was public knowledge for that ransom to have been paid at such a high level at $10 million, they're going to be a target again by other criminal groups. Because if they've paid that and satisfy that, someone else out there is going to do exactly the same thing to them, and they're just going to be a constant target. And you're right, the consultants, it's their job to suppress that information, not let it get out anywhere, and especially the outcome. Yeah, and these policies,
you can break them down into 3 parts. There's you have the policy, you take the policy out, you take your cover. There's 3 parts. There's the before part, which is having all the advice on how to mitigate risk, what to go about, how to protect yourself in a better way, how to just be a bit more aware of everything going on around you. Then there's the during, so if the kidnap took place or something along those lines. Then there's the reaction of the insurance policy for that, so the access to the consultants. And who are just there to reduce the risk and get you out as safe as they can. And then the last part is the after. So you don't come home from a kidnap and that's it. They disappear. You never hear from them again.
Oh yeah, because there's all sorts of
like rehabilitation costs, that sort of stuff. And then there's advice on how to maybe deal with the public or deal with the media, how to go about it. Do you report it? Do you not report it? That sort of stuff.
Not let it happen again.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the extra security that you can put in after a kidnap to prevent it from happening again. So they'll work with you to understand how it happened, how it came out, maybe what you could have done better to protect yourself. And then they'll advise you on the next steps to take. Basically. So they're with you for the whole process. As such. An insurance policy would be.
I really like that, because if you were just left to the insurance company, it would be different. But you're not. Effectively, you get more from the consultants. You get everything from the consultants, apart from a reimbursement of a ransom, than you do from an insurer. You've got to buy the product through the insurance company, and then you get that service. And then if there is an event, then they'll reimburse you. But the consultants here are shining bright, and we know that is where the value is for these ransom policies, or kidnap ransom. And in the time that I've been doing this, I've realised that it's not that expensive.
No.
The ransom amounts, or what you're insuring, can be very high, but the premiums are not that expensive, and very reasonable and very affordable for especially big corporations who are sending 40 people on a project and rotating them and things like that, and it's going to last 12, 24 months. It's really quite a reasonable price. So, Charlie, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think we could talk forever about this, because it's such an interesting topic, and lives are important, and way more important than assets. A house burns down, you can rebuild it, and there might be some sentimental things in there, but if no one's hurt, no one's hurt. End of. But if someone's taken, when it comes to a kidnap situation, it's so critical to protect that life as much as you can. And I'm really pleased that we're doing a lot of this, because morally it just makes you feel good that you're there helping someone get that peace of mind and get that protection when they need it. So we'll wrap up the podcast right there. That was a nice long chat about Kidnap and Ransom Insurance. I hope you have taken something away from our in-depth talk. There's even more to this whole insurance and scenarios that we've mentioned. There's a lot more to it, but if you've got any questions, then by all means get in touch with us. SaxonInsuranceBrokers.com is our website, and you can live chat on there with us at any time, 24 hours a day pretty much. And yeah, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.